Now, we're going to grade projects periodically throughout our time together here as an art class, either in the physical classroom or also in the e-classroom as well. And we use a form like what you see in front of you right here. And you will have to make your own form for submitting your artwork to the Google Classroom to me or by email. However, these are the things that are important that I believe this is how we fill this particular form out in the regular classroom, and you will make your own version of this when you submit your artwork. But we use something called the 5 C's, and it's important when we fill out these particular forms that you make sure your name is on it. The period that you're registered for in my classroom is also extremely important. The date that you're submitting this helps a lot, so I can keep track of people's grades as I'm submitting them. And actually the name of the project. It will either be design or drawing or painting, something like that, that identifies what I'm looking at when I'm taking grades. Now, we do have the things called the 5 C's. There are 5 categories that we assess and evaluate, and each category is on a scale of 0 to 2. 0 in that category would mean you simply did not do the work. A 1 would mean you did about half of the work required of that category, and of course a 2 would mean that you satisfied all the requirements of that category. Now, on the form in the physical classroom, you would notice there is a column for the student and then a column for the teacher as well. So we use increments of 0.5 or 1/2 to grade our work. So you have an option to go with a 0, a 0.5, a 1 if you get it halfway there, a 1.5 if you're like 75%, or a 2. So this is the highest is better, lower numbers are not so good. So the first thing that we evaluate is correctness. Did you do the project according to the directions that I gave you? And those directions usually are very lengthy and require you to do a worksheet of some sort and some preparatory planning, and also lay out your paper and then follow the directions carefully. And if you were able to do all of that and abide by and create your project with all those directions in mind, then you could give yourself a 2 here. Now, the next thing would be completion. Completion is that the project needs to be 100% done, completely done, colored in, opaquely, and it must be on time, on the due date. So if you can say, yes, my project is all the way done, it is opaque, and all the way done means, did you do the worksheets as well? Is it colored opaquely, and did I get it done on time? And if you can go yes, yes, yes to those, then you would give yourself a 2 in that box. Now, let's say you didn't completely color it opaquely. Well, then you would probably need to take off a 1/2 point. If it was late, well, you probably better take off another 1/2 point. So that's how this all works. We go to composition, the third part. And composition is how do you put together colors and shapes so that they are visually interesting to look at. And so if your shapes are really crisply drawn and the colors you select are visually interesting and make people want to look at it, and the shapes, if it's supposed to represent something, it represents that, and if it's meant to be a triangle or a square, it's crisply drawn, and that the colors are bright and unpolluted, that's a good thing. So if you can abide by all those, if you've got good composition, interesting colors and shapes, then give yourself a 2. Otherwise, you had to have to take off some points. Now, craftsmanship is the concept that you are going to do your very best work. So craftsmanship or craftswomanship, if you're a female, is this your very best work? Does it look like it was made in an art class that was supervised by an art teacher? And is it your best work? And if you know in your heart and mind that there is nothing else you could have done to make it better, and that is your best work, then you give yourself a 2. But if you do know in your heart and mind there's things you could have done to make it better, perhaps talk less and work more, or give more sustained focus to your work, then you should be honest with yourself and take some pointage off there. And that is just self-assessment. You're trying to be honest with yourself. And then lastly is creativity. Creativity is when you're coming up with some new and interesting solution to the same old problem. And so I see students do these projects all the time, and they make good projects, but they don't come up with a new and interesting solution. But periodically somebody does. And I will usually say, you know, that is a new and interesting solution, and if I ever say that to you, you should remember that and give yourself a 2 for creativity. The way that we decorate the background squares when we do signatures and such, that's also creativity. As you go farther in the art classes here at Warren, you get more creative freedom to do things, and so we would tally all of these up, and at the bottom of this, then we would put whatever the score actually was. Most students get between 7s and 9.5s. A 10 is a rarity, although periodically a student will really nail it. And if they think it's perfect, and I look at it and I think it's perfect, we award a 10, and that's quite an achievement. Now typically though, we have some sort of a small difference of opinion, and so I put my grade in here, and probably somewhere between these two, but more likely on my side, is the grade that you'll get. Now the practice of doing that simply so we can come closer together in what our belief systems are about, what a piece of work is, whether it's perfect in your mind or it may have flaws in mine, and so the next time around we get more accurate with our self-assessment. So that's how you grade the project. But there's also working habits that go along with your project as well. And these also are scored on a 0 to 10 basis score. So 0 means you didn't do anything and you don't deserve very much, and a 10 would mean that you're a model student. So you ask yourself, you know, during the art time, during art class, how do you use your time? Do you get your materials out? Do you work hard? Do you put your materials away and then you leave the classroom, or you go on to something else? That's good. Production rate is, are you able to keep up with the instruction, or are you falling behind constantly because you can't stay focused on what we're doing here? So if you keep up with what we're doing, that's good. That means notes, making folders sometimes, making the drawings and doing the coloring and painting. If you're keeping up with it, that's good. Positive interactions. Do you get along with your classmates? Do you conduct yourself in class in a positive manner? Do you have a good relationship with your teacher? So if you are a positive school citizen and you get along with your classmates and your teachers, that's also good. If you do not, that doesn't mean you're an evil person. It simply means you need to be honest with yourself and maybe take off some points on your work grades. We have rules. In the physical classroom, we will go over those rules, and those rules are on the rules video. If you abide by those rules, get to class on time, pay attention to when I'm explaining things to you, that's good. If you don't engage in disorderly conduct, that's also good. Same thing here. We go to application of principles. That's when I show you how to do something artistically, or I show you an example or a demonstration. Can you go back and can you do that again on your own without further instruction? And if the answer is yes, I can do that the first time I'm shown, then that's a good thing. And if it's not, well, then you need to think about why it was that you didn't catch it, and then you need to apply yourself to that later on. So on a 0 to 10 scale, you give yourself a 0 to 10, maybe 7, 8, 9, 9.5 if you've really been working hard in class. And that's how we do grading for projects. We grade the project with the 5 C's, and we grade our daily work habits simply through these observations, these 5 areas, and we give ourselves a 0 to 10 work habits grade on that. These things together is how you get your grade for the project. So what will have to happen is that you all, I'm going to zoom down, so bear with me, just like in the real classroom. What will have to happen for you all, though, is you will have to make your own card or your own grading form. So it doesn't have to be this complicated. It can simply, you can reflect back on what we have done here today, and with a ruler you can probably do this on an index card. I'm using an index card. So we would just simply take our ruler, and at the top of our index card we would draw a line, and we would maybe all the way across the index card there. And what we would do there is we would put in our name at the top of this, and then underneath it we would perhaps draw another line, and that would be the period and the date. And this should be drawn in clearly so that it can be seen if you send me a photograph of your artwork and your grade form. And this is very helpful to me. And lastly, we'll draw one big long line like this, and we can put on there what the project name is. So we're really almost precisely duplicating what we see here, but it's not doesn't have to be a thing of beauty. It simply has to be effective. And now we will divide down the right side of our card like this, and maybe make a box out of that. That seems to be the best way to do this. And then really, I gotta erase that a bit. So we need what looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 for a total there. So if we go and we make a little mark here halfway, and then we divide that into thirds, and then we do the same thing, we back to our halfway mark where we're going to divide the bottom half into thirds. That should give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines right there. Okay, then we can use our ruler again and simply draw off our line. So all we're really doing is just creating our own rubric. If you were in the physical classroom, we would use a regular grading form like I showed you, and that's would be plenty to do what we have to do here. And then all we've got to do is next to it write the letters of what it is that we're going to put on here. And so in this case I would just call this correct. And you can always review this and then complete for what that means. And then composition, we'll just put composition. And then craftsmanship or craftswomanship if you're female. And then we'll have creativity. And we'll just call that create. And then we will have, of course, the total down here. And then we can just split this in half, I guess. And up here will be the student. And we'll call this one the teacher, if I should have to interact with you and explain to you something. And that's how we'll just do this. And so you'll make your own grading form, not quite as completely beautiful, of course, as this one, but you can make your own grading form, and when you submit your artwork by taking a photograph of it, you can also submit your grading form right next to it in a photograph, or you may also just make it as a separate attachment, and or you can make your own grading form resembling this if you so desire as a Word document. You may want to use that frequently as we turn in projects. So I hope that makes sense to us all here, and this will be at the end of the project when we do this. And so there's how it's done. How do you grade your project?